very good morning to you. On this 12th day of June, it's a Thursday morning, and we are back down in Cape Town. It is a little different down here, but it's good to be back after a 3-month absence out of the Cape, where we've been broadcasting for the past 3 months. And if you've joined us, you are on the 5th connection, where we are live every morning at this time at 8 o'clock, and we broadcast to two other platforms, Facebook and YouTube, as well as on radio. If you have joined us, then you have the link to our YouTube station, where we have about 180 broadcasts that are mounted. You have the advantage on YouTube of seeing our slide presentations from time to time, and diagrams and illustrations as I talk through the storyline of the book of Philippians. It's in that book that we notice that Paul raises the issue of mindfulness. He's spoken about the meta mind in 1 to 11 of chapter 2. From verse 12 onwards, he talks about the macro mind, the mind that needs to pervade the believing community. And once he's finished with that, he goes on to what we would call the meso mind. Once he's done with the meso mind, he goes to the micro mind. Because after he addresses two examples of the meso mind, he talks about himself as one who has severed egoic attachments and continues to do that. You'll notice a little later on in the text, he says, I haven't arrived. I haven't gotten there yet. But I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. So when we look at this mind that Paul is talking about, we are looking at the disposition that believers are to have. Not only at a meso level, at a macro level, but also at a micro level. At the level where they are going counter to egoic attachments. They are not allowing stuff, things, and people, attachments, to get them egoically locked. We can get egoically locked to systems, isms, ISMS, isms. We have them outside of the believing community, but we also have them right inside of the assembly. We do not need post-biblical filters to read the scriptures and understand what the text says. It matters not if your guru has ascribed to an ism, be it Arminianism, be it dispensationalism. The beauty, though, of dispensationalism is that it gives you an inductive method to engage with the text. And you are not bound to buy the conclusions that some have made by turning it into a system, trying to codify. My American counterparts would say codify. Trying to codify and systematize and bracket and categorize things into blocks the way we do. But to learn to do what I call pure biblical theology. What does the text say? Not what does it teach? You and I as human beings, we teach things. But what does the text say? Because the thing that matters is not a system, an ism. It is scriptural authority. So Paul has moved through chapter 1, where he talks about mindfulness inspiring connections. And then he goes on into chapter 2. And now he's going to talk about the beauty of seeing our minds ignited, our ignitions. Our ignitions are cognitive because we trust God. We walk with God. And so, right here in the biblical text, we have that beautiful idea in chapter 3 of how to be involved with integral veracity. That is what counts. That is what is important. You will notice that fatal ideology is what inhibits believers because they buy into systems, and systems thinking gets you to bow at the idolatry, in front of the idolatry of ideas. And right here in this chapter, Paul is unpacking, he is countering what egoic attachment looks like when believers fall foul or fall prey to propositional knowing. And they think that propositions capture all of truth. Well, a proposition is a data compression. And what a data compression does, it compresses, it cuts away context. That's why dispositional statements are a good place to start. Not to make it the end game, but a good starting point, because what God desires for us to encounter is dispositional knowing, to know by experience who He is, what He does, and how He operates in His world. And so this morning, it's going to be very important to continue to listen carefully, not react, but listen very carefully to what the text is saying. What is God saying when He talks about believers being mindful of Christ, to be mindful of Christ? Well, He's going to start in verse number 11, because yesterday we looked at verse 10, that I may know Him. To know Him is the overall driving goal of Paul's life. Dispositional knowing has power to it. Why? Because of this concept of dying and rising. It's the Tao, it's the way that wayfarers engage in. Because when Jesus calls a man or a woman, He bids him or her to come and die. If any man will come after me, let him take up his cross and follow me. Let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. And verse 1 to verse 11 of chapter 2 talks about the humbled, self-exalted. And that's what Paul is explaining now in chapter 3 from verse 11. Because he says, my purpose is that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection from the dead. What's the resurrection from the dead all about? Do I have to be put into the grave first, literally to die in order to rise? Well, that'll be a physical death. Yeah, he's talking about identification death. He's talking about identity transform. That I may, by any means possible, attain the resurrection from the dead. Well, many would say this is a reference to the rapture, when Jesus Christ comes to catch away men and women who have savingly believed in Jesus Christ. I think there's a very strong suggestion here throughout the 11 verses that what he has in mind is dying to rise. He wants believers to experience resurrection power in the here and now as they sever ego attachments. because my flesh is a merc. It's moral, it's educated, it's religious, and it is cultured. And don't forget that. Flesh, my flesh is ingeniously creative. Can put a three-piece suit on me and slap a tie, a collar tie on me, and can get me to put on a preacher's tone that I sound very pious and I look the part, but I'm not living the part. When I was going through higher education training in theology, we used to joke about the guys who came from Bob Jones University. Many men of God have moved through that institution. And when they came to DTS, the seminary I was at, we used to joke with them, say, hey, you guys are cool, eh? You guys walk on water. But you know, as DTS students, we don't just walk on water, we create the water we walk on. That was the sort of resident joke. But oftentimes, we as believers think that we create the water we walk on. And we don't understand that dying and rising is an event, not only in the life of Christ, but in the life of a believer or believers, that becomes an iterative pattern. It's a pattern that can be repeated over and over and over and over again. Dying to rise, dying to self, dying to the stuff that holds me down. It's going to cost nothing short, men and women, nothing short of death to those things. Dying to sin and being alive unto God. Dying and rising is an event that becomes an iterative pattern for transformation. And it's transformation that will culminate in a future final transformation when our bodies are transformed, where we receive not just where we have received the spirit of adoption, but ultimate adoption, which is glorification of the body. Romans 8:23-27 talks through that idea. Finally, this body will take on immortality. So this is a very key verse to experience resurrected living. I think it was J.N.D. Darby who kind of coined that phrase in that way, resurrection living. No text uses those two words following each other the way I am now, but captures the idea. To live in the power of his resurrection, verse 10 says, that I may know him dispositionally in the processes, the perspectives, and the participation that I have in and with life. That's how I want to know him. And the power of his resurrection. There it is. You want power? Well, learn what it means to die to your own aspirations as a believer. We talk about truth to power. There's truth to power. Die to self and live to God. It's about the humbled self exalted. And what you are attached to this morning, egoically attached to, your job, your position, your small ambitions. Die to that and see God raise you up on eagle's wings. That song is such a refrain. You raise me up to be more than I could ever be. God does that. And yet we can have a taste of that long before we drop and get put in a box. The dying and rising is an event that becomes an iterative pattern, a repeated pattern for transformation for the believer that will ultimately culminate in a future final transformation when we are with God for eternity. It's what Eastern Christians talk about. Theosis. In the West, we're a bit scared of that word. we become God-like. We don't become God or gods, we become God-like. And so, what the writer here is emphasizing, what he's putting in the forefront, is this idea of dying to rise, the humble self exalted. What do you need to die to this morning? What do you need to get severed from, cut away from? You will feel the bite of the edge of that razor as it cuts through your egoic ambitions, stuff that we constantly get tied down to. And so this morning you have an opportunity to again experience transforming power. But you will first have to go through the valley of the shadows. Oh, how we grimace at that. We writhe in pain. Oh, Lord, please, no. And yet, God uses pain. Our life that we live is so rich with experiences that He uses suffering to get us to His goal for our lives. The eschatological end is Christ-likeness. And He'll get us there. And so this morning, as you go with God, be mindful that you're going to face death-like encounters. But after death comes resurrection. Trust you're experiencing some of that in your own world and in your own life as you go with God. Goodbye for now.